Well, hi there. Merry Christmas. I'm Angela Gifford, and I am here about 90 miles south of the Canadian border in North Idaho with my family. We're expecting a ton of snow this year. I'm the girl that just took the hay bales and pumpkins off my porch because I decided it looked ridiculous, even though I don't have time to decorate for Christmas yet. So if you're like me, you might be hustling and bustling through this season. I'm a student, so kind of gearing up for finals week and getting big papers written and that kind of thing, as well as working a little on the side retail for Christmas and managing a family. And so sometimes this season just seems really chaotic and busy, but it's a good time for us to stop and prepare our hearts. I'm excited that I was asked to be a part of this study for Advent with Ignite. I'm new to the virtual community and thankful for the ministry there and for the opportunity to be a part of that. I was given a passage in Isaiah 7, which on its own is a little bit confusing. So I'm going to read the passage and then we're going to dive a little bit into the background. So hopefully it makes a little bit more sense. And then I just want to share a couple insights with you that I found in the scripture as I was studying it. So here we go. Isaiah 7, starting in verse 10 through 14. Later, the Lord sent this message to King Ahaz. Ask the Lord your God for a sign of confirmation, Ahaz. Make it as difficult as you want, as high as heaven or as deep as the place of the dead. But the king refused. No, he said, I will not test the Lord like that. Then Isaiah said, Listen well, you royal family of David. Isn't it enough to exhaust human patience? Must you exhaust the patience of my God as well? All right, then, the Lord said. The Lord himself will give you a sign. Look, the virgin will conceive a child. She will give birth to a son and call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. So obviously that last verse there really speaks to the Christmas story, and we can recognize that since we know the Christmas story. We recognize when it says, Behold, a virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and you will call him Emmanuel. We recognize that as the Messiah and about the Savior's birth. However, this is a prophecy that happened about 700 years before Christ came, so it was not as recognizable to Ahaz, who this message was delivered to. But let's just talk a little bit about Ahaz and the background here. This message was given to Ahaz about 700 years after the children of Israel had been delivered from Egypt and had gone through their wilderness wanderings and their becoming a kingdom of Israel. And again, it's about 700 years before Christ came. So trying to think of the magnitude of that time period, and what can happen in 700 years. If you're an American, United States, from the U.S. like me, that's way longer than we've been a nation, almost triple the time. So it's such a long period of time to be thinking about this promise that continually was given to Israel and just the unfathomable weight. I can understand why maybe they came to doubt that a Messiah was going to come, that they would be delivered. Ahaz was king from about the time of age 20 to age 36, so he was a young king. He was an idol worshiper. He didn't acknowledge God. He sacrificed his own sons in the fire. So he was an evil man. He didn't acknowledge or honor God. This passage comes at a time in history when the nation of Aram and Ephraim, the tribe of Ephraim, partnered, and they were trying to conquer Judah, that Ahaz was the king of. And it says that the people's hearts were shaken as the trees shake the wind. They were terrified. And so Isaiah is sent to send this message of encouragement to Ahaz. And he says, don't be afraid of these. He compares Aram and Ephraim to smoldering stubs of firewood. They're going to try to come against you, but it's not going to happen. And he belittles their importance. But he says, if you don't stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. And that's the passage that leads up to where we go into verse 10. If you don't stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. And so God is appealing to a king who doesn't honor him, who doesn't worship him, who's an evil idol worshiper that sacrifices his own children in the fire. And he's saying, you don't need to worry about other nations, but if you don't acknowledge me, then you're not going to be able to stand. And then he gives them this announcement about the Messiah coming. And he says, you yourself, go ahead and ask the Lord for confirmation. You can ask as big of a request as you want, as high as the heavens, as deep as Sheol or hell or death. You can ask as big as you want, and God will give you a sign that he is big enough for you to trust, that you can trust him. And Ahaz says, no, I will not test the Lord like that. And so when we read this, we need to understand that the way this is written, Ahaz is not, he's not saying, I won't test the Lord like that. What he's really saying is, I won't test the Lord like that. Do you hear the difference? It's not so much about not being willing to ask for a sign as not being willing to ask for it from God. And so Isaiah says, you know what, never mind. You don't have to ask for it. God himself is going to give it to you anyways. And here's the sign. A virgin will conceive and give birth to a son. Now, what's really interesting about this is that the way this announcement was given, the wording that was used, is comparable to how they spoke of the gods in that day and age, that a god would be born. The whole virgin birth, that kind of thing. So Ahaz would have, just in the way this prophecy was given to him, the wording that was used, even though he didn't believe in God, he would stop and take notice that something supernatural was being predicted here. So there's a couple things that I noticed in reading this passage. One is that God is the master of speaking someone's language. Ahaz was not God-fearing. He did not worship the Lord. But God knew that he could get his attention by using the kind of language Ahaz was used to hearing. And so he used the prediction of a virgin birth of a God, of a Messiah, to get his attention, because that was common and how the people spoke of their gods and their deities and even the idols that they worshipped. So God is a master at culture. When he came down to earth from heaven, he spent 30 years studying our culture so that he could use the right stories and the right parables before he started his ministry, and to really know how to give the gospel to those he lived among. And this reminds me of one of my favorite passages in Psalm 19. I don't know about you, but sometimes there are people in my life that I feel like I don't know how to speak their language. They have a personality that's not like mine. I think my dog wants to say hi. He's asking for attention. This is Cooper. Say hi, Cooper. Okay, so anyway, they might have special needs, learning disabilities, personality differences, and I don't know how to communicate to them. I don't know how to speak their language. And God gave me a verse when I was struggling with somebody specifically in my life, and how to communicate to them, somebody I was praying for. And Psalm 19, starting in verse 1, says, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world." And when I was praying for this person, and God showed me this verse, and he was reminding me, Angela, I speak their language. You might not, but I do. I can speak autism. I can speak Japanese. I can speak bipolar. I can speak to anyone who has needs. And I know their heart, and I know their culture, and I know their language, and I can get through to them. And we see this confirmed in the way that God attempts to reach Ahaz's heart, as he speaks in a way that will get through to him in a language and in a communication style that he will understand. So as you're praying for people in your life that maybe you're having a hard time with, or you don't feel like you can ever get through to them, trust and pray, and remember and pray to the God who speaks their language, and that he can get through to them no matter what, no matter the challenging situation. The second thing I saw in this passage that I wanted to point out is just the simple fact that comes right before this verse. It's actually in Isaiah 7, I believe verse 9. I got to get back to that passage. But where he says, if you don't stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. Ahaz was looking for temporary material answers to the danger his kingdom was in. He was looking for someone to come and save him and rescue him from Assyria and from those that were ganging up against him. But God was providing eternal spiritual answers. And we are not different. We are no different than where Ahaz and Israel were. They were continually looking for deliverance from earthly enemies and for better, more prosperous living conditions. And if that doesn't sound familiar to you, I don't know what will. In our day and age, and I have been guilty of it too, and perhaps you have, where especially this time of the year as our wish list grows, sometimes we're thinking about a new car or a remodeled kitchen or a better job, things that will meet temporary needs, make us feel better about this life. But God is providing eternal spiritual answers that might make this life easier, but regardless of whether or not it does, it provides eternal answers and eternal peace that we can't get from the temporary. So I just want to encourage you to dwell on that as you're approaching Christmas season, to remember that God did not come for temporary answers that gave earthly fulfillment. He came to give eternal answers that gave spiritual fulfillment and eternal security and possibilities. So dwell on that as you're working up to this Christmas season, and pray for those in your life that don't know him, and begin praying that God will reach them in their language, because he's the God that can do that. Merry Christmas. Have a great season.